Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Dose. I'm your host, Michelle Harrell, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Henry Winslow. If you're not familiar with Henry, produces in my opinion, one of the better and best psychedelic newsletters out there. So if you are interested in learning more about psychedelics in general, I highly recommend Tricycle Day. So Henry, welcome to the show. And I'll let you also give yourself a little introduction and tell a little bit about your story and how what I would like to focus on today is really talking about how psychedelics, transformed your life, how they also shaped what you're doing today and where you're hoping to grow your business in the future. I think that psychedelics can be a really useful tool for helping people find purpose and also unlocking creativity. And so I really saw you as somebody that embodies that. And that's why I invited you to join today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that nice introduction. It's great to share this conversational space with you, Michelle.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot in there, so we can see where the conversation takes us. But
exactly.
I suppose to answer what I feel is like the crux of what you just shared,
yeah, there's a lot.
Purpose and psychedelics unlocking that purpose. It's really interesting that you bring that up because before I ever was introduced to psychedelics or they were on my radar beyond, cultural, misinformation and memes pretty much.
Right.
I was a yoga teacher and I actually had a podcast called Dharma Talk. And
Oh.
if you're familiar, Dharma in the yoga tradition is loosely translated to purpose or path. And that was really the focus of the conversations I always had with people is like, what does Dharma mean to you? And how has your yoga practice kind of influenced your path and helped you come to a better understanding of your purpose? So it's a really kind of nice, natural segue for me because my yoga practice is actually what took me to psychedelics. So, I had been practicing yoga for about 10 years and was a full-time yoga teacher at the time. And, when you're at that level of intensity around your yoga practice, it's a lot more than rolling out your mat and doing some stretching.
Yeah.
There's, millennia of esoteric philosophy and history and practices beyond the physical movements. And, one of the foundational texts of yoga is called the Yoga Sutras, written by Patanjali. And it lays out an eightfold path to achieve the end state of yoga. So yoga is both the practice and the final stage. The other word for the final stage is samadhi. And in the text, samadhi is described as a non-dual state, meaning that the distinction between the self and everything else, the self and the other, or between the subject and object, if you will, falls away. And when that illusion is dismantled, there's only one. There's only one, all that is. And you might call that God. You might call that universal consciousness. There are a lot of ways to describe that source. But that was something that was really gripping to me and something that I cared a lot about learning about. But I didn't really think that my yoga practice in the modern age, when I was hustle bustle, like trying to teach 50 classes in New York City, was going to get me there. And I kind of was resigned to that. And then a friend of mine who is also in my yoga community, in my Sangha, if you will, came in and told me and a few others about a psychedelic ceremony that she had just participated in. And like I said, before that, I didn't really have any awareness or interest in psychedelics. But when she framed it as being a way to access samadhi, that got my attention. And so I went to a ceremony, which was with Bufo alvarius or 5-MeO-DMT, and had that experience. And it was completely transformative.
I was going to say, what is psychedelic to start with? I feel like
and I didn't even realize, at that point, that there were different tiers of intensity and that many people spend, like many psychonauts would work up to that.
Right.
But to me, it was like, okay, this is the thing that she did, and she had this experience, and it fits nicely into, my entire worldview. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I happened to hear you talk about that experience on the Thank You Life podcast just a couple of weeks ago. And I was blown away by your description of how that occurred and what you took away from it. I don't know if you want to share. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't know if
happy
you
to
want to
share.
share a little bit about that, because yeah, and maybe how that then led to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so my experience of it was very emotional,
Mm-hmm.
not very visual. For to the listener, I don't know what kind of level of familiarity or experience they have with various psychedelics, but
Mm-hmm.
for me, 5-MeO-DMT was not a hallucinatory experience at all. I mean, it was pretty much blank as far as visuals, but it was intensely emotional
Mm-hmm.
and very confrontational in terms of my sense of identity. So the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that I felt was like my being ripped from my body and pulled down into the center of the universe. And there was a lot of terror around that experience because it felt like I was dying.
Right.
And I remember like kind of talking to myself through this experience and saying, okay, the shaman, the facilitator said to me, the most important thing is that you surrender to the experience, whatever comes up. So I told myself that. And by the way, like this is such like a violent and strong molecule that resistance is futile anyway. And I could tell that. So I said, okay, I'm going to surrender. If I just died, let's figure out what death is. And so I
Yeah.
accepted that I died. And as soon as I accepted that, all the fear and panic just melted away. And on the other side of it was just pure bliss. I mean,
Yeah.
it truly was everything that I could have imagined samadhi to be, or nirvana, if you're thinking of the Buddhist tradition,
Mm-hmm.
and more, because you cannot intellectualize that experience. And I realized that I had never felt this level of pure, unencumbered, unconditional love in my life.
Yeah.
So it was, completely irreversibly transformative for me to go through that experience. And when I came back, I just was flooded with this sense of gratitude. Like, okay, here I am alive. And what am I going to do with this new knowledge of what consciousness, what existence,
Mm-hmm.
what being alive means?
Yeah. Would you say that it kind of removed your fear of death? And
In a
uh,
way, yeah. I mean, it's
yeah.
hard to say because, if I were to confront my mortality today and really felt like my life were in danger, who knows how I would respond. But,
Right. Yeah.
you know, I often share this about the experience. The major takeaway I got from that was that like physical danger is real, mental
Mm-hmm.
danger is real, psychological, like emotional damage, like all these things can be inflicted on me. And like it's fair and reasonable to be vigilant about avoiding it, right?
Right.
But underneath all of that, I understand without a shadow of a doubt, because I know from an direct experience that my spirit is untouchable. It's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of addresses the fear of mortality
Yeah.
in a way, but we'll see, when that time comes, how I actually respond.
Yeah, no, I feel I mean, I had a similar experience on psilocybin, but I've really carried that through, and it's really foundational to my faith. Is like I'm not afraid of death anymore. For me, it feels like a rebirth rather than a death. At least that's how I experienced it during a particular journey. So, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. I think, yeah, I think a lot of my clients find as well, even if they're not feeling like they're dying,
Mhm.
many clients of mine find um, self-love and really describe feeling, yeah, that unconditional kind of love and light and peace during their psilocybin journey, which they're able to then carry forward. So I think that's one of the, powerful kind of messages that many people gain from these types of plants, right? And why it's so transformational. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really hard to convey without having the experience, but I'll try anyway, is that the reason why people take that away often is that it no longer feels like you are you.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, especially with Bufo or
Mm-hmm.
5-MeO-DMT, a characteristic part of that experience is my sense of identity becomes
Right.
delocalized. Like it no longer is connected to the stories or the physical
Mm-hmm.
body or any of the experiences that I carry with me in everyday life. And it
Mm-hmm.
became when I'm nothing and I still have an experience, I still have a form of pure consciousness, that means I'm everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is like, okay, maybe that's what it is when you no longer are contained inside a meat suit.
Yeah. Yeah. Real kind of ego separation or ego death is what a lot of people describe, right?
Right.
Yeah. No, thank you for saying that, because I think that's helpful. I try to, when I have prospective clients and we're doing preparation, if they're parents, I always try to kind of help them. I'm like, it's like you can't describe to people what it's going to be like.
Mhm.
You do your best, but I'm like, it's like, having a child. People
Yeah.
can tell expectant parents what to expect, but until you actually do that and go through that and have a child,
Yeah.
you can't describe what it does, and how
Yeah,
it
there are a lot of
feels.
similarities
Yeah.
in my experience. When my son was born, I said, this is probably the most emotionally concentrated moment of my life, with the exception possibly of the bufo.
Hmm.
Because it's like, when he came out, I remember the emotions flooded before I even had an explanation for it, right? Like the
Hmm.
emotion led the intellect, and it was similar with
Yeah.
bufo. And the other part that's comparable is the identity shift, which also means an identity
Yeah.
death, right? Like
Yeah.
there is grieving there. That's what postpartum depression is like your
Right.
past self died and you're a new person now.
Yeah. Yeah. And new focus, new priorities, right?
Mhm.
For many people. Yeah. So, awesome. Thank you. So, okay. So following that experience, how, I'm sure it changed you. So how did that
Yeah.
manifest in your like day to day? How did you integrate that experience?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I was going back to a life that was ready to receive those sort of changes more than some people are. Like you hear a
Hmm.
lot about people going to Peru for an ayahuasca journey and then they have to like reinsert themselves into like cubicle life, which I
Right.
imagine is really challenging.
Yeah.
For me, I went back to my spiritual yoga community and like, played the gong and told people about oneness, so they
Yeah.
they were ready for that, and it wasn't like it didn't make me seem crazy,
Hmm.
which is really great because I didn't have the language or frameworks that I know now around preparation and integration. It
Hmm.
just happened to work out that my life was set up for me to be able to take those things and actually work with them.
Right.
So I continued teaching yoga and continued traveling around the world with my wife. And uh, I didn't do anything with psychedelics professionally right away.
Hmm.
Some part of me knew like this was such a heavy and life-changing experience that it would not be wise to make rash
Hmm.
decisions that could change the course of my life.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was a little bit destabilizing, even in spite of the support that I had, right?
Yeah.
So didn't do anything with it right away, but I became interested in
Yeah.
having other experiences with other substances, other medicines. Started learning more about it, reading more about it, and it eventually this was all around the time of COVID, right? I mean,
Hmm.
my first Bufo experience was 2019, so not long after that, there was quite a lot of information
Hmm.
and flow of news in
Hmm.
psychedelics.
Hmm.
2021 was like the era when all the biopharma companies started getting like crazily funded in the zero
Hmm.
interest phenomenon. And Oregon came online, as you well know,
Yep.
in like 2022, 2023. So even as a consumer, just someone who was following the space, I was interested in seeing everything that was happening. And it became kind of difficult to find all that information and parse it because it was disjointed, it was disparate, and also not everything was presented in a way that was really accessible
Hmm.
to everyday people.
Right.
Fortunately, I had a background in biology, like I had studied that in college and had a job working in healthcare, so I got it. But you had that end of the spectrum. Then you also had the total other end of the spectrum where people are talking about these concepts from a very spiritual,
Mm.
like woo woo kind of way. And either
Right.
of those can be alienating to a certain demographic for different reasons.
Hmm.
And I just felt like there was a space for somebody to come in and consolidate this information, play a curative role, and make the information fun and accessible. And so that became sort of the insight and directive of Tricycle Day when I launched it 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I found you fairly early on because I've been following
I
you
think you
for a
did.
while. Yeah. And that was indeed what spoke to me about your newsletter. I was receiving other newsletters, which are also good, don't get me wrong. Um, but they were much more science heavy
Mhm.
and very serious as far as their tone, right? And
Yeah.
very kind of collegiate.
Yeah.
um, and which is great, I still get some of those and do read them. But
Yeah, same.
I really appreciated, your creativity around how you presented these topics, your humor. Um, Obviously, the memes are always great. So, I think it really did speak to kind of the everyday person who, just as you, grew up with all kinds of misinformation around these these plants and medicines. And I
to
just
be
thought
clear,
it was
you know, like,
breath of fresh air. Sorry.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, like for me, it comes back to like, what is actually the purpose, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to come full circle on your original question, what is the purpose, not just of me, but of Tricycle Day?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I want to have fun creating the content. So that's a nice cherry on top. But the reason that I'm doing that is because there's this whole, you know, center of the bell curve of the population that is
Mm-hmm.
not being reached. And
Mm-hmm.
the purpose of Tricycle Day is to increase access to psychedelic medicine for people who might benefit from it. And if those
Right.
people are not being spoken to, then they're being left behind.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, and that's a lot of my clients. You know, I attract very, clients similar to me. Obviously, I think whenever you lean into your purpose and you're in alignment, that's what happens. So I get a lot of, midlife professionals struggling with burnout, struggling with transition, struggling with, depression, anxiety, and they're not folks who probably would respond to, the woo woo stuff. And so I often recommend your newsletter to those folks because it is just so consumable. It's so accessible to kind of everyday reader. So,
I Trojan horse a little bit of spiritual woo woo, just the right
yeah,
amount.
yeah, a little bit. Yeah, no, you do. That's true. And you're right. It is just the right amount, I think. And always with some sense of humor, which I appreciate. Yeah.
We can't laugh at ourselves then.
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
No, exactly. So I'm curious. So, I mean, eventually, you found yourself in this industry, working in this industry. But I'm also curious, how did that experience, your initial experience and the experiences thereafter, how have they shaped how you do show up, for your business, but also for your family and with your friends? And I'm just curious if you've seen, big changes there as well.
Yeah, lots. I mean, you know, there was like a famous quote, I can't remember who it's attributed to, someone like Alan Watts or something. It's like, when you get the message, put down the phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's meant to say like, okay, you've had this experience, you got your insight, don't keep going back to the medicine. But Rick Doblin had an interesting response to that, which really resonated with me, which is, yes, that's true, but life is not stagnant, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there are always new messages. As
Mm-hmm.
you take the first one, you apply it, you reach a new level, and then it opens up new challenges and new problems and new questions, right? So
Yeah.
it's time to pick up the phone again.
Yeah.
So that's kind of characterized the way that medicine and psychedelics have helped me along my path.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the big practical takeaway that I got from that very first Bufo journey was basically not to take myself so seriously, because, if it's true that underneath it all, my spirit is safe, then all these petty concerns don't have to weigh so heavily on me. Like, yeah, they're real, but they're just part of the game, and just play the game.
Yeah.
The game's no fun if there are no challenges and obstacles. So it kind of took some of the pressure off in a way. And obviously, it's always work to integrate. And part of integration is reminding yourselves of these lessons and practicing overriding limiting thought patterns that are not in alignment with what you know to be true.
Yeah.
So that's one way. And then, I mean, more recently, I've gotten involved in, mastermind groups that are assisted with medicine to head on, like, tackle business challenges. So that's been kind of a really different and under discussed way that people are using psychedelics these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit? I think our listeners would be curious. You want to tell us a little bit how that works for people so they understand what you're talking about?
Yeah. I don't want to put anyone on blast because,
No.
people have their own choices around how much they want to disclose their work, but
sure, of course.
I won't name names, but basically the setup is the classic, sort of entrepreneurial business mastermind format where each person has a shot in the hot seat. They go in and they talk about their challenge, and everyone else listens. They ask clarifying questions, and then they offer suggestions either from their own lived experience running their business or, reframes to the question. Maybe you're thinking about it in a limited way to begin with. And the medicine assisted part is that everybody has dosed on the same specific medicine. And in this case, we're talking about a pretty obscure synthetic called 3-MMC. and it's comparable to MDMA in a way, but has a cognitive stimulant aspect as well. So
Okay.
it has the heart opening, it has the fear muting, which can be really beneficial in these kinds of spaces, because when you're talking about your business and there are other people at different levels, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
peacocking happens, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
shrinking because of intimidation and imposter syndrome. All those things come out. But with this medicine, all of the self-judgment is just removed, like
Yeah.
so you're open. And
Yeah.
the cognitive stimulant part, like you're also fluid with your
Right.
speaking, more articulate than usual. So it acts as essentially a truth serum where everybody wants to support one another. And it's pretty magical, I have to say.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I've never participated, but I've heard you talk about them, and it does sound pretty powerful. Sorry, I have an itch in my throat. So
It's okay. We're all dealing with allergies
I know.
these days.
Yeah. So, and you've also taken Tricycle Day and used that to launch another side of your business, which I am a beneficiary of. So I know that you've started, working with actual psychedelic practitioners
Mhm.
like myself who are trying to grow our business, trying to figure out, excuse me, how to market ourselves, how to brand ourselves, and really reach, our client base. Do you want
Yeah.
to share a little bit more about that? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. First, I'll bring it back to the mission, the purpose of the organization. It really felt like a natural extension because, if the goal is to increase access to psychedelic medicine, I can do that, one, by normalizing the conversation and creating accessible education for people. But the next level, and I think an even more impactful level of it all, is to help the people who are on the front lines, the actual medicine workers like yourself, to reach more people, affect more change. And that creates this ripple effect at which Tricycle Day maybe is the center, or at least one node, and exponentially increases the amount that we're actually, making these medicines more accessible. So, first it began with the newsletter. Then I added the directory, Maria's List, and our agency, Let Go Studio, which works with clinics and plant medicine centers mostly to help them scale their audiences. And then the most recent way that we're enacting this mission is through Practice Expansion, the membership community that you spoke of. And you jumped in when it was still in beta, and it was a cohort-based program. And I'm very grateful that you took that chance, and glad that you got benefit from it. It's been really cool to see it grow. To come back to the question that preceded this one, like how are psychedelics changing the way that I approach business? One is realizing that it's not about me as much as I
Mhm.
think it is. We're
Yeah.
constantly reminding myself that I am but a channel, right? Like I am but a conduit for universal intelligence to move through me, just like you are and everybody else is. And realizing that allowed me to say, this community creates value inherently from the connections that are within it. It's not because I come in there and do something or say something. It's because I've created this platform
Right.
and created a container in which there is trust and safety for people to make connections and create value amongst themselves.
Yeah. And one of the things that I have just loved about it is that community because it can feel quite lonely out here sometimes as a practitioner, especially given the industry and the nature of, the fact that these substances are still illegal in most parts of the United States, and trying to navigate and build this new industry. We often feel like pioneers, a little bit alone out here, right? And there's some inherent risk that those of us who practice with these medicines, both legally and underground, are willing to accept, because we really believe in what we're
Yeah.
doing, and the power that these medicines have to help people. So yeah, thank you, because I've really enjoyed being able to talk with others who are going through the exact same, growing pains that I'm going through, and really, you know, gain insight from each other and each other's learning and mistakes, right? Because we all make mistakes too as we kind of navigate this path. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fantastic platform. And if there's anybody out there who is wanting to get involved in this industry, I highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and to
Yeah.
the listener, if you are, a facilitator either in the regulated space or unregulated space, I talked a lot about, how people are supporting one another, which I do think, I'm learning is the key value proposition of it all, but there's also education. So we bring in
Yeah.
different experts who come in and lead workshops and offer Q&As around specific tactical things that you can do in this sort of nuanced space where it sometimes feels like you cannot, or you're hesitant to be more visible and put yourself out there.
Yeah, 100%. No, and it's yeah, I've learned so much. I'm still learning. So every month, learning something new. And so how do you feel like psychedelics have also helped you kind of, I mean, you said this in a way, but broaden your idea of what's possible, and
Yeah.
and really just allow you, when you do come up against a roadblock, do you manage it differently now compared to like your pre-psychedelic life?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I've learned, and I can't fully credit this to psychedelics because it's something that I first learned through my yoga practice, but has certainly been reinforced by my experience with the psychedelics, is that in those moments where it feels like there's no answer
Mhm.
and I'm really like caught between a rock and a hard place, often the answer will come if I can figure out how to remove the pressure.
Yeah.
And to me, that often looks like stillness. It looks like walking without any, headphones on or without like trying to solve the problem, right? Go
Right.
into a place where you can get into flow. My yoga practice is still, one of the most consistent things in my life because it creates that space for inspiration. And I use that word intentionally, inspiration, because it's like, these creative ideas are not created by us.
Right.
They come from somewhere, and you tune your mind to act like an antenna so that it can receive them. And then it's up to you to allow it to move through you rather than clenching and holding on to it because of fighting for your limitations.
Right. And I mean, I know for myself, when I feel pressure and something's feeling too hard, there's no space for that inspiration to land because I'm just so like, focused on the hard part.
Yeah.
And that is my biggest piece of advice always for every single client that I work with in, for integration, is find a stillness practice that works for you.
Yeah.
And not everybody loves meditation. So I think a lot of folks immediately think that I'm going to suggest that, and I'm like, no, you don't have to do meditation. It can be as simple as sitting outside with your cup of coffee or tea and having the sun on your face. It
Yeah,
doesn't
that's a
have
great
to
one.
be, yeah, it doesn't have to be the thing that people tell you should do a meditation practice. Some people really freak out they feel anxiety at the thought of trying to meditate.
Exactly, which is the exact
So
opposite reaction you want. It's
right.
counterproductive. I'm big on walking. I think
Mhm.
walking is so underrated. Just like
Mhm.
taking an hour walk a day,
Mhm. Yeah.
it's like somewhere some of my best ideas come from.
Well, and especially obviously, hopefully outside,
Yeah,
like
outside.
I feel like anytime in nature where you're not distracted by technology or,
Mhm.
I think that
Yeah.
that is so, I mean, and there's studies that show, right? Exposure outside and nature every day helps mental health. I mean,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
proven.
and I'm not even, like, walking through the redwoods or anything like
Yeah.
that. I'm walking through a relatively suburban neighborhood, but being outside, getting your legs moving, and just
Mhm.
I think something about getting into the repetitive motion, it's
Mhm.
almost like a mantra practice,
Yeah,
a form
it's
of
like a flow
transcendental
state.
meditation where your mind is occupied with something repetitive, which kind of distracts the
Mm.
conscious mind from taking you in weird places and
Mhm.
allows the subconscious ideas to rise.
Yeah, no, 100%. And how do you use play at all? Because I also often, especially with my female clients above
Yeah.
40, I feel like women, we lose our playfulness sometimes when
Yeah.
we become mothers and we're working and we're trying to be, super mom, super wife, super whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yoga
and
checks that box for me, the
yeah.
physical practice of yoga, because
Hmm.
I love, like, getting into shapes and doing
Hmm.
handstands and all these sorts of things, and I never lost the fun of that
Yeah.
even through all the years of practice, so, that's one, and then the other thing I do, though, admittedly, it is harder. I think this is the next level up of difficulty, is just practicing total presence with my son when we're playing together.
Yeah.
A little bit harder because, you know, my mind can get pulled into other things I'm supposed to be doing, but it is still a good practice. Practice can be challenging.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think being a real present parent is so hard,
It's hard.
especially these days, right? I mean, everyone's working, everyone's distracted with technology. There's just so many ways to not be present. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And I will say, you know, that's one thing that for me, gosh, if I could go back, you know, I would wish I would have found some of these plants and medicines when I was a younger parent, because I would definitely have parented a little bit differently. So thank you for that. Yeah. Gosh, is there anything else that you want to share about, you know, your future vision for Tricycle Day and for this, you know, the practicum that you have started and all of the work you're doing with practitioners? Where do you see it growing?
Well, this is really fresh.
Oh,
I don't think I'm not sure. This will be the first place I've ever.
Oh, we're getting a hot take on.
Yeah, this is breaking news.
Although by the time this comes out, it probably won't be.
Yeah, it may have already, depends when this comes out. Maybe it will have already happened. Yeah. But I'm going to be rolling out a third weekly edition of the newsletter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so currently it sends on Wednesday and Sunday. Wednesday is the roundup of the news this week in psychedelics. Sunday is the interview series, Psycho Not POV. Friday is going to be a totally new format, which I think is going to be great. It's going to offer practical wisdom. Okay. I'll leave it at that for now. It's going to offer practical wisdom to the, you know, consumers, the enthusiasts in my audience, of which, you know, that represents about 70% versus the other 30% is professionals, psychedelic professionals, that is. So we'll leave it at that for now, but that's a big expansion on the content side. And then, you know, the focus on the community is really to, you know, recruit as many facilitators who feel like this is a missing skill set for them into the community, so that they can reach more people and affect more change and more growth and transformation among their clients as possible. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I could even see facility owners also benefiting from the group, not just facilitators. So I just wanted to mention that, because there's plenty of those here in Oregon, and Colorado will be opening some. So in fact, the first one, I was going to say, I saw it in your newsletter. The first service center opened, or has been licensed, I suppose.
Has been licensed.
I don't know if it's open. Yeah.
Not yet, but that was an important milestone that needed to happen before.
Yeah, exciting. Well, thank you, Henry. I so appreciate you doing this. I know you're a busy man, especially if you're putting out a third newsletter every week starting soon. That's a lot of work. So I do one a week, and I find it already challenging. So I can't imagine how you do 3. So
I think this one will be a slightly lighter lift, because the real intention of this one is not for me to necessarily write it per se. It's going to be facilitating conversation. It's going to be sort of turning the newsletter into an aspect of community as well.
Okay.
So yeah, it's going to be
excited to see
sourcing recommendations and insight from facilitators on Maria's list.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm on Maria's list, so
you are.
I'm excited.
You're going to be hearing about it in more detail shortly.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to hear more. Thanks for the news drop.
Yeah, you got it.
Well, thank you, everyone. I hope that today's conversation, you know, inspired somebody out there, or, you know, maybe you learned something new. So that's the intent of this podcast, is really just to share the information and share other people's testimonies and stories around how these medicines have improved their lives. So thank you for sharing that. Henry, any last thing you want to promote or say, or to our listeners?
I would just leave it at, if you are interested in learning about everything that's happening in this space, getting practical insight now, or hearing from people who are movers and shakers, advancing psychedelic policy, research, and all of those things, then the best way to do that is to subscribe to Tricycle Day. It's free. It always will be free. And you can do that at tricycleday.com.
Yes. And you can follow him on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So
I'm there.
All of the platforms. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like it, subscribe, share it. It would really help us out. And we will be moving on next week to a new topic. So thanks for listening. And thank you, Henry.
Thanks, Michelle.